views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and today we're going to update you on what's happening in and around our borough. Coming up on today's show, we'll give you an update of what's going on exactly right here in the Bronx. Plus, we'll speak to Councilman Andy King about the release trial date for an NYPD Sergeant who fatally shot a woman in 2016. After that, we sit down with our political commentator. He'll be in studio discussing the Senate Budget Committee's decision to move the tax bill to the Senate floor and the latest on North Korea's missile launch. Then we go and talk to a Bronx activist who will tell us about an upcoming panel discussion taking place at the Pregones Theater. And World AIDS Day is right around the corner. We'll introduce you to what the Alliance for Positive Change is doing to shed light on the disease. And then lastly, we'll introduce you to an organization that's going about bringing awareness to human trafficking and domestic violence. So stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way, because right now we're officially open. And hello everyone, I'm your host Daren Jaime, and today is Wednesday, November 29th. Of course, you're watching Open, a live program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV set. We want to encourage you to stay connected to us, and you can find out more about us at Twitter on BronxNet TV, and then Facebook at Open BronxNet Television. Well, starting off with news out of the television industry, Matt Lauer, host of NBC's Today Show, was fired today. The news was broken live on the air during the Today Show, as Lauer is accused of inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. Lauer has been the anchor of the Today Show for more than 20 years and becomes the latest firing in a growing string of high-profile personalities accused of sexual misconduct. Well, a lot has been going on over this busy week, and we're going to catch you up with some things happening locally right here in the borough of the Bronx. Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. has voted in favor of the Bronx rezoning of Jerome Avenue, but under a list of conditions. One of those conditions includes affordable housing. The rezoning project plans to affect 92 blocks along Jerome Avenue and will create 4,000 apartments, of which 1,500 will be available for affordable housing. The Bronx Borough President wants that number to rise to 2,000. He also wants the city to commit funds for Jerome Avenue and the creation of new schools, as well as identifying alternate locations for the automotive industry. The BP says, quote, "The people of the Bronx are not opposed to improvements," said Diaz. "In fact, we expect our fair share of community benefits." The project now heads to the Planning Commission, followed by the City Council, and that most likely will include some other changes. Well, the Metropolitan Transit Authority plans to add additional cameras, only this time the cameras will be added on the bus driver. The controversial proposal has drawn criticism from drivers who say the cameras would be intrusive, this despite the fact that drivers have higher rates of assault and harassment on record compared to other transit workers. Now, so far, roughly 100 cameras have been installed on New York City buses, according to union officials. Well, Mayor Bill de Blasio has officially repealed the cabaret laws, which has banned dancing in a majority of city bars and restaurants for the past 91 years. The law took effect in 1926 during the Prohibition era. It was considered illegal without a cabaret license. Now, out of the 2,000 bars and restaurants in the city, only 104 have licenses. Mayor de Blasio stated, quote, "We want to be a city where people can work hard and enjoy the city nightlife without archaic bans on dancing." The last time cabaret laws were used to crack down on bars was during the Giuliani administration, according to CBS News. Now, the repeal follows the creation of New York City's first ever office for nightlife. Well, Bronxites gathered together at Lehman College to discuss and educate citizens on issues regarding the Independent Democratic Congress. Reporter Shanice Powell was there, and she brings us the story.
Gather at Lehman College to get information on and discuss the issue of the Independent Democratic Conference, the IDC, and its alignment with the Republican Party.
Today is a forum in the Bronx at Lehman College to educate people about the IDC and how by caucusing with Republicans, the New York State Senate, they are in fact blocking progressive legislation in New York State.
This group of New York State senators, led by 34th District Senator Jeff Kline, has been elected to office as Democrats, but their support of the opposite party leaves voters uneasy.
I don't approve what they're doing. I'm totally against the fact that we have Democratic candidates or representatives that we voted for that are in the Democratic, column, and they're voting with Republicans. I didn't vote for someone to represent my community to vote with a Republican because I am not a Republican, and this is what they're doing there.
The IDC's alliance with Republicans raises issues like that of health care for women.
And they're all, voting against women's issues, which, I am totally against. I am pro-choice and pro-women.
Issues at the federal and state level impact us locally, especially since in my own community we're mostly women of color, people of color, low income, and when anything changes that impacts our access to afford health care, it directly impacts us the most.
Conducting this forum on the grounds of the 34th District here at Lehman College to educate people on the effects of the IDC, led by the district senator himself, shows their intent to make their voices heard on their disagreement with the group's choices. From BronxNet, this is Shanice Powell.
And thank you, Shanice. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Open right after this.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
On October 18th of 2016, Deborah Danner, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, was shot and killed by a New York City police sergeant. According to reports, they say that the officer was, that Danner swung a baseball bat at the officer, leading him to shoot her. Now, it's been 1 year since the tragic loss of Danner, and Police Sergeant Hugh Barry is now up for trial that's set for January the 30th. Here now to talk about this shooting, we welcome now Council Member of the 12th District, Andy King, who has been very outspoken on the shooting, as well as a call for justice. And Councilmember King, good to have you. First of all, our condolences to you and your family, and good to have you sharing with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. As we talk about this now, we said January 30th is going to be the date of the trial. Obviously, a lot of people were hoping that a trial would actually come. Your thoughts on now a trial date being released?
Well, now that trial date's released, all I would like to see is that not only just justice is served, accountability is established, and that Sergeant Hugh Barry should actually go to jail for killing a New Yorker. We've gone through this time and time again in this country. We've gone through time and time of this, that people of color get shot and killed by police officers and no one's ever held accountable. Whether you're talking about Eric Garner, you're talking about Ramadi Graham or Kai Gurley, when does the narrative stop? So we are now in the council, we are now in the neighborhoods, we're in the community are saying, hey, Commissioner O'Neill even said that there was a mistake. the officer failed. There's protocols that are in place when you have to deal with a mentally disturbed individual. Now, I will say to all the men and women in blue, I applaud you for taking on the job to protect. I've even done the civilian class, and I understand how the blood can rush, the adrenaline flows when you're in a tight situation. But you have been trained. You are a sergeant. You've been trained when you have to deal with a MDP, as they call them, and say, hey, how do we address this now?
MDP meaning mentally disturbed person, right?
So if you know that this is what you're walking into, certain protocols kick in place. It's not like you just walk into any violent situation or potentially violent situation. In addition, you know, she's been known to this precinct. There's been calls to this house before. So there's a history. So there's a different way that these officers should have addressed it, and these two officers made a blunder going in that day.
Let me go here about justice, because you've been talking about justice, wanting justice. You mentioned that there have been previous incidents. I date myself back to being a reporter or anchor right here, sitting here with Francis Lavoti and Anthony Baez, and the judge then was Gerald Scheinlin. And Judge Scheinlin said that, you know, that basically with the evidence that he received, he saw that there was something wrong, but yet and still it wasn't enough to convict. In this particular case, we're seeing now that the officer has opted not for a jury trial, but a trial by judge. Does this give you any optimism or any real cause of concern?
I sat in a trial with a judge, with Ramarley Graham, when it came to violating police codes of conduct. And if you have a judge that is committed to finding the truth and delivering a verdict on the truth, then I'm fine with it. You know, I don't want to spend taxpayers' money, because if I'm looking and saying Daren Jaime is sitting here with a pair of glasses, I don't need to have a whole conversation for 5 months to find out whether or not you're wearing glasses. If the evidence on day one, it's almost like with open and early discovery. If the information early on dictates that there's a guilty or innocent, then we should swiftly move towards a decision. And in the case that's this officer, you know, he moved swiftly to pull out his gun when he could have pulled out a taser. You know, you're talking about a mentally disturbed person, then when you pull out a gun, then proceeds to swing a bat. Yeah, of course, this is what you've created that environment. But in the essence of this real conversation for New York and all of America, this is a challenge, because if I really believe, and I know through the history of us, if you respect communities of color, then you don't go in with thinking that I have to pull out my gun first. You're going to tell me, because this never happens in other communities, you're going to tell me there aren't mentally disturbed individuals in white communities or any other community, but in the black community, there's always a kill first, and then we'll figure out how to answer questions later. And we must stop this when it comes to the people who have taken a vow to protect and serve us. And if you can't do it, then this is not the job for you.
Now, this took place in 2016. Subsequently, since then, talk to us about police-community relations, because you're a councilman in the district. How has this changed relationship between community and police?
I say it all comes down from the head. Now, in the 4-7 precinct, we had an Inspector Real Stevenson, and congratulations, he was just promoted to Deputy Chief. But he was able to create a new culture in the 4-7 precinct that allowed community and officers to recognize that we all coexist in one community. If you get the heads that are thinking that way, then you can have a paradigm shift of the officers' thinking. But at the end of the day, you cannot take a tiger and take the stripes off the tiger and not call it a tiger. I call it for what it is. If you are an officer who are not sensitive to the black community or communities of color, you will not, because you took some training, all of a sudden become sensitive when you come into an intense situation. Your natural instincts come in and you get kick in. If you've been taught all your life that the black or brown communities are savages, they don't know how to behave, they don't know how to act, you know, you always got to be on guard, then you're going in to police that community. But when you go into a community that doesn't have those labels, you're going there to serve that neighborhood. So we have to have a different paradigm shift from the heads up because the police guard is still an old guard. So if those same ideas are still back from 1960 and 50s and they're captains and sergeants and chiefs now, if they haven't changed their mindset, that's the same mindset you offer to a new officer who is green, who walks in, who may not have the experience of growing up in a community of color.
Have you had the opportunity to talk to the Daren family since this is the new date has been released?
I have not had the opportunity yet, but when it did came out, I did put out my statement, and I'm looking forward to speaking with them, to offer my support in any way, not only as a council member, but just a brother in Christ, to do all we can to make this situation that much more easier for them.
So what's the message you give to people, given the fact that there's a lot of questions, a lot of people in our community certainly feeling like, hey, we've been down this road before when it comes to police, and to see a conviction, that doesn't always happen, has not happened. So what do you tell people and give them the assurance of that there's going to be equality and justice for all?
Sadly to say, there is no silver bullet to ease people's anxieties whether or not justice will be served, because there's a history that justice does never prevail for the black community when it comes to a killing. If this officer didn't have a badge and he pulled out his gun and shot this lady because she wielded a bat, that person still would be going to jail and would be charged with murder. So I don't understand how the rules are different if someone violates your own protocol. See, he violated his own protocol because he was dealing with an MDP. So once you violate your own protocol, even though he was stripped of his gun, stripped of his badge, and he's on modified duty, you know what, then you're not
That's a normal case for anybody that is involved in a police officer shooting.
Right. So now what happens now? If you're found guilty of violating, then you should be able to be charged for committing a crime, because now you go back into the civilian population. We can't just exclude you and put you in some other protective world that you don't get an opportunity to face the crime that you've committed. So all I can ask everyone, when these cases don't work right, that's when the community has to come out with an outcry. And as much as I appreciate some of the top brass at NYPD, if they can't figure out how to make sure that truth and justice is served, then you got to start changing heads. If people don't want, it's just like with elected leader, elected official, if they're not doing what you elected them to do, then you got to get somebody else in there. And the only way that happens when people put a public outcry when things don't work out right for the public.
All right, Councilmember Andy King, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
No pleasure.
We'll continue to follow the story. As we said, the Deborah Dana case will be going, I should say it's not the Deborah Dana case, it's actually the officer's case, and he'll actually be going before trial. Trial is set for January the 30th. You'll continue to follow it here on Open. It'll be a trial by judge, and as those details become more available, we'll bring them to you here on Open. Take a quick break, but when we return, we'll inform you with the latest in politics. That's coming up in a few. We're recapping our top story. NBC anchor Matt Lauer fired earlier today after charges of sexual misconduct. Lauer, who's been on the anchor desk at NBC, has been there for more than 20 years. We'll continue to bring that story as more details continue to unfold. In the world of politics, Democratic Congressman John Conyers also under fire today after questions of alleged sexual misconduct. Now, Conyers has admitted to saying that he will step down from the House Judiciary Committee in the wake of a recent investigation into the allegations of sexual misconduct. And we are now joined by our political commentator and analyst, Lee Bynes, who's here sharing with us a little bit about that. He's going to talk to us about this, and then we're going to get into North Korea in just a few minutes. But let's talk about this, because obviously Matt Lauer obviously dominates the news. It's early, it's fresh. But in the world of politics, we know that John Conyers is a high-ranking official in the Democratic Party. Conyers says, listen, I'm not stepping down, but I will move away from the House Judiciary Committee. What do we know, and what's going on here?
Well, you know what, the floodgates are open right now with regards to sexual misconduct in this country, and I'm not just talking about Hollywood or DC, but it's happening pretty much everywhere. Nancy Pelosi came out on a few of the Sunday shows and tried to give Conyers a little bit of cover, considering that that the fact that the man is an icon. These aren't my words; those are hers. He's been around. He's 88 years old, and but the cover's not going to work. I mean, when I said the floodgates are open, pretty much anybody who has a beef is now coming forward, and they don't feel pressure. They don't feel fear. They feel that this is an opportunity to make their feelings known, and there's going to be a lot more high-profile names coming down in the future. I don't know where this goes, but and I don't want to make light of the situation, but these are job openings for a lot of people, including yourself as a professional on the air, who may have an opportunity coming down the line, because apparently there's not that many gentlemen left in the world, or if that is even a viable concept anymore, based upon what we're seeing right now.
And we know in Washington, we also have Al Franken, who's still trying to get past his, and then you also have the candidacy of Senator Roy Moore. And so do we see this being a real thing going into 2018, where this is going to continuously be the topic of discussion, where we're going to see continuous allegations of women coming forward? Can we predict?
I think we can definitely predict that that there's going to be a lot of problems moving forward, and specifically with Roy Moore, considering the fact that he's been charged with a lot more serious crimes than the others, because he's been involved with young girls. We're talking about 14 years old, but he refuses to walk away from the race. He's got a lot of support down in Alabama, despite the allegations. So we don't know where it's going, but I definitely can say with a high degree of certainty that this is not going to change. This event is here. We are at a watershed moment, and I think women have been empowered to come to the fore and make their situations known.
Let's talk about some other news. When we talk about the GOP tax plan, it is getting set to move towards the Senate floor. The Senate Budget Committee on Tuesday approved the Republican tax bill. A crucial vote by the full chamber is expected later on this week. We know that a lot of people have been taking a look at this and saying, listen, when it comes to this tax bill, particularly Democrats, not a lot of debate, not a lot of conversation has been given to it. However, a very real possibility this passes.
It's a possibility that it passes, but then again, we're looking at a moving target. There's a lot of people, and I'm not talking about the Democrats, I'm talking about with the GOP. We've got Jeff Flake, we've got John McCain, we've got Bob Corker. Now, those three guys literally have absolutely nothing to lose. They have gone on record time and time again indicating that they have real serious issues with President Trump. And so you add those three. You have those three that could sink this thing, along with Murkowski in Alaska. And believe it or not, they got some blowback from Gary Johnson in Indiana. He's a staunch Republican, and but all of these people have various issues with what's going on, and whether or not the president will able to strong-arm them along the way is going to be difficult to see, because they have a constituency that they have to answer to. And Gary Johnson specifically, one of the reasons why he's one of the most important could-be no votes is because he is a strong Republican, but he's fighting for more of these cuts to trickle down to the small business community, as opposed to being top-heavy with the corporate community, because the corporate community are the ones that stand to be the big winners in this. Now, how do we drill down a little bit more on this issue? Is we want to talk about Gary Cohn. He's the president's economic advisor, former president of Goldman Sachs, probably a billionaire in his own right. He had a meeting with the Wall Street Journal, a group of CEOs with the Wall Street Journal, as he went around the country trying to gin up support for this plan. He asked for a show of hands of all the corporate leaders in the room who would actually bring about would they reinvest? Would they bring their money back that they're holding outside of the country? Would they bring that money back and invest in businesses here? Not one hand was raised. Another major event that went down was the economics, the folks in the economic environment, the people who actually rate these things and determine whether or not the promises that are being made, that the investments are going to, these tax breaks are going to bring all this money back to the country. Donald Trump is actually saying we could bring in as much as $4 trillion over the next 10 years. Nobody agrees with that. With a raise of hands, out of 42 well-respected economists, only one said that there's a possibility that that would work out. Now, this is not the first time it's been tried. George W. Bush in 2001 tried it. He did it again in, I believe, 2004 or 2007. In each situation where they tried to lower the taxes for corporations so they could repatriate all of that money sitting on the sidelines, what happened was when they got that dough back in the country, they just bought back stock and shares and strengthened their position in the market, but they did not turn into any kind of jobs with any pay raises that people could actually hang their hats on.
I got to get into this other subject too before we change that quickly. Sure. That is the issue of North Korea. When we talk about North Korea, looking at what's going on, it said Tuesday night that it has conducted a successful test of a new type of ballistic missile that would, quote, put the whole United States mainland within range. Now,
what do we have to say about this? Well, we're in my lane now because international issues is what I cut my teeth on. The North Koreans, we've talked about this before, they are not backing down. They are launching more sophisticated missiles, testing these situations. The only thing that keeps them off the grid right now is the fact that they haven't actually figured out the reentry. Now, this latest missile test that went up, it went higher than it's ever gone before. It went further than it's ever gone before. The only thing that they have to do now is be able to mount a nuclear weapon on top of that missile, and yes, they can strike the United States. Their position is that they have to do this simply because it's the only way for them to protect themselves from the United States as far as the aggression, and they're sticking to it. Lindsey Graham was on the news yesterday talking about, well, you know what, it looks like that we reached the point where we may have to go to war. I don't know what that means. I don't know where we're going, but we do have someone in the White House right now where a mindset is questionable at best. So we're pretty much in a wait and see mode. But this thing is heating up. Again, we have two entities who refuse to back down in any way whatsoever. The North Koreans, up until now, has been saying, look, if you cut back on the military games, the war games that you're playing in our backyard, we will downsize our efforts for our nuclear ambitions. However, the United States won't back down, so they're not going to back down. We're at a loggerheads, and we pretty much just have to wait and see what happens.
Lee Bonds, our political commentator. You can catch him here every week here on Open, as well as being the owner of Retrovision Media. There you can read Issues Under Fire and find out the latest that's going on, as he says. He has particular emphasis on international issues and affairs, and so if you want to find out more about an international issue or an affair, check him out on Retrovision Media. Lee, thanks again.
Thanks again.
All right, stay tuned. We got more Open coming up. Be right back in a minute.
Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
I guess sometimes things just happen. Devastating things. Your whole world changes in an instant. That's what happened to me the day my mother had a stroke. I'm Paul George, and I want you to spot a stroke fast. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke fast.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
For all the papas out there, let's stop what we're doing and take a moment. A moment to be with our kids. They can be loud moments, goofy moments, sporty moments, dorky moments, kooky moments. Moments where we talk or walk or just hang out. It doesn't really matter. They all count because every time dads take a moment to be with their kids, Well, it's pretty momentous. So let's all take a moment to make a moment today.
Well, Hurricane Maria has devastated the island of Puerto Rico, leaving people unaware of what the next day will bring. Now, Bronx activist Julio Pabon plans to have a panel discussion at the Pregones Theater discussing the future of Puerto Rico. He joins us now over the phone, and good to have our friend and brother Julio Pabon with us. Julio, good to have you.
Good morning. How you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. All is well, and good to have you here on the show with us. And once again, thank you for taking the time to share with us a little bit about Puerto Rico. I want to begin a little bit about just some breaking news that we have out of that, and that's on Tuesday. Senator Bernie Sanders unveiled a $146 million plan, or $1 billion plan, I should say, to really provide relief to the people of Puerto Rico. That has been controversial for some. Many people saying it's much needed. Other people saying that maybe they need to go in another direction. Give me your thoughts on what you think about Senator Bernie Sanders' plan for Puerto Rico.
Well, I'm here in Washington, D.C. I attended that release of the information yesterday at the Senate building. It was crowded, which means that there's a lot of interest in that particular issue. Majority of people that are very interested in rebuilding Puerto Rico. As you know, Puerto Rico has been treated as a stepchild. This whole issue with the storm post-Maria has shown people in a very clear way. If you compare the type of support that has gone into Houston immediately after the storm and to Florida immediately after the storm there, and you compare it to what's happening in Puerto Rico, has happened in Puerto Rico, it's like, wow, it's like night and day. And the fact that today we're celebrating almost 10 and a half, almost 11 weeks since the storm, and you still got close to 50% of the people in the island of Puerto Rico that don't have any electricity. The grid is down, and that you have so many people that still do not have water, and the fact that there are people that are dying because people who have issues like where they need insulin that needs to be refrigerated, or certain medications that they need to have, and respirators that need to be on because of electricity, and they're not getting those services. Those numbers are not being counted into the number of people that have died or that are, probably about to die or get critically more ill because of the situation in Puerto Rico.
Well, Julio, let me cut in here and ask you about Washington.
Country, right?
Can you hear me?
Not. This is Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States, we're U.S. citizens.
Right.
This is not, like Timbuktu, Africa, or in some place in extreme Central or South America. This is right here in the U.S. territory.
Well, let me ask this, because you talked about being in Washington, D.C. when the senator actually unveiled that $146 billion plan. What was the attitude amongst those people that were in the room as this was going forward?
Oh, everybody was super supportive. There were even some people that actually believe that it's not enough. It's not enough at this particular moment, because this is not a done deal. This is a plan that a progressive senator, along with Elizabeth Warren and several other senators, Democrat senators, supported. Now it's going to be introduced in the House by Congresswoman Nidia Velázquez, and hopefully they can get this moving. But remember, we are dealing in a Republican-held, controlled administration at all levels, Senate, House, and the president, who has always felt, and he has made it verbally clear, that supposedly Puerto Rico has been a debt to the United States. So we don't know where this is going. We know that this is good faith efforts on Bernie Sanders. I and many people in the room yesterday congratulated him and Elizabeth Warren and all the others for coming forward with this type of Marshall Plan, which they believe that Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, because it's not just Puerto Rico, but also the Virgin Islands, which are also U.S. citizens that have been forgotten, that both of these island territories, U.S. citizens, need the help that has not yet come through.
Talk to us a little bit about Pregones Theater, because as we talk about Puerto Rico, right here locally, there'll be a panel discussion at the Pregones Theater discussing Puerto Rico. What can Bronxites and people from across the city expect in this panel discussion?
Well, what it is that I've been attending since Hurricane Maria, September 20th. I've been attending many forums, many fundraising events throughout the city, and it's all for a good cause, which is all to raise money, to raise resources and supplies to help Puerto Rico, from the Governor Cuomo down to Mayor de Blasio to our elected officials. Everybody has come through, the Puerto Rican diaspora and our friends in the African-American community, Anglo community. Everybody has come through. But no one seems to be talking about afterwards. Besides sending water and supplies and generators to Puerto Rico, what's going to happen to Puerto Rico after? How is this grid going to be repaired? Is it going to be repaired the same way? What's the effect of this thing that very few people know about called the Jones Act, which is an act that's basically telling the Puerto Rican people that no foreign ships can dock in Puerto Rico and bring any supplies. Puerto Rico, almost everything that Puerto Rico needs comes by from outside, gets imported. But there's a law called the Jones Act that very few people knew about until it was raised because of Maria, where it was lifted for 12 days, which was allowing foreign vessels to dock in Puerto Rico and bring supplies. If a foreign vessel comes to Puerto Rico to bring any product, whether it's milk or cars or whatever, it cannot dock in Puerto Rico. So it has to either go to Jacksonville, Florida, where it gets unloaded, and then it gets reloaded on a U.S. flagship with U.S. Workers and maritime workers. And then that ship can come to Puerto Rico. And then that's what's causing Puerto Rico to have prices that are 25% higher than U.S. prices. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate is way even half of what Mississippi is. So it's a really strong and unfair dichotomy that's affecting the island of Puerto Rico, which has all come out in the wash because of Hurricane Maria. So this is some of the issues that we have to address. Should Puerto Rico continue to be mandated to continue to follow the Jones Act? Can Puerto Rico be exempted from the Jones Act like Guam and other territories in the United States, Virgin Islands and others? Or is Puerto Rico going to continue to stay under this ridiculous law of the Jones Act that forces all foreign vessels? Greenpeace, 2 weeks ago, had a vessel, Greenpeace, the very well-known and very well-established and respected vessel that goes around the world bringing assistance. They came to Puerto Rico, and they were not allowed. Greenpeace was not allowed to dock, and they were bringing supplies to Puerto Rico and help, and they could not dock. They had to stay out in the 12-mile limit. Another ship had to go out there. They had to transfer the materials they had for Puerto Rico into another ship that was a U.S. flagship, and that flagship was able to come in. That's ridiculous.
Julio, I mean, unfortunately, I know there's a lot to discuss, and I'm going to have to tell people they have to come to the panel discussion because obviously we can't discuss it all in this segment, but we want people to come to the Pregones Theater real quickly, tell them date and time so they know where to go.
It's on Tuesday, December 12th at 6:30, and this is one of the first community forums that I'm organizing this one as a result of trying to get basic information of what we're talking about to the local grassroots people. A lot of people don't know what's really happening in Puerto Rico, besides the fact that we need water and supplies and stuff. What about these long-term issues?
Okay.
What about Medicaid reimbursement? All of that. That's
Julio, I'm going to have to leave it there because that's all I got for this segment. But I promise you that if the people go to the panel discussion, I know that all of that will be discussed, and we'll definitely have to bring you back so we can continue the conversation.
And Bronxton is going to be televising it, so they can also be watching it there, too.
You see? So you don't have to tell it all right now. There it is. Julio Pabon, my brother. Take care, buddy.
Take care. Thank you so much for your interest. Keep up the good work.
Hey, thanks a lot. Julio Pabon coming to us live out of Washington, D.C. After Senator Bernie Sanders put together a $146 billion proposal, releasing it to the Senate. Of course, Julio there in with those in Washington, D.C., bringing us a live update. Listen, we're taking a quick break, but we're going to be back more open. Stay with us. We're returning right after this.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting him in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Although the number of HIV diagnoses have decreased over the years, it still remains an issue. According to the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene 2015 HIV surveillance report, 500 people were diagnosed with HIV, while 290 were diagnosed with AIDS right here in the borough of the Bronx. The Alliance for Positive Change is all about helping and promoting positive change for those suffering with HIV and other chronic illnesses. And joining us now to talk about the organization and what they have in store for World AIDS Day, we welcome now the Director for Development and Planning at the Alliance for Positive Change, Ebony Ross, and Brandon Lee, Counseling, Testing, and Referral Specialist, and both of you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you.
Good. So as World AIDS Day is coming upon us, obviously a lot of work that's going on across the world, but here locally, I want to talk about some of the things that are going on. And I want to first talk about the Alliance for Positive Change.
Yes, the Alliance for Positive Change is an amazing nonprofit organization. We believe that everyone has the ability to feel better, live better, and do better. At the Alliance for Positive Change, we help people receive access to care. Many of our clients have HIV, other chronic conditions, prior substance abuse issues. But when they come to the Alliance, they feel like a whole person. Everyone matters at the Alliance.
So we talk about the Alliance, obviously helping people deal HIV, AIDS. And before, that was just a word that people kind of like swept under the rug, didn't want to talk about it. Nowadays, the conversation seems to be a little bit more out in the open and people are talking and dealing. Do you find that being able to talk about and then also offer services has increased in terms of community awareness and people in the community being more receptive?
Yes. As it comes down, I do counseling, testing, referrals. And when it comes to testing, it's more about the conversation. When people come in, what we first do is we talk about your sexual history, what's going on with you that had you come in today. And then after that, we start the test. The test is only 20 minutes, but the conversation could be as long as you need it to be. And we always go where there's no stupid questions. You can ask us anything at any time.
And, and when we talk about help, I mean, obviously it's something that people need when diagnosed with HIV, AIDS, even for those people who have family members who are associated with HIV and AIDS. So give us a little bit about the help and the support that's available out there for those who are dealing with this.
Well, at the Alliance, we have an amazing peer program where clients come in, they receive the opportunity to get trained, and these individuals actually go out into the community and train those individuals. So it's twofold. Also at the Alliance, people receive case management. They have access to pharmacy. We have an OASIS program when people can come in and receive help with prior substance abuse issues. So there's a lot of services at the Alliance.
And when we have those, talk about those services and things that are happening, I want to talk about, you've got the holidays coming around, and there's a program that's coming up, Positive Homes for the Holidays.
Yes, Positive Home for the Holidays is an initiative that we recently started. We want to raise $5,000 by January 2018, and this initiative is going to help people who need linen and pillowcases and slippers and little things to help them to prepare for their new home.
And when is that taking place?
It's taking place now.
All right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So we asked if anyone's watching to go to our website and to donate, because we know that we will get $5,000
That's
by
it.
January.
Well, we want to encourage people to come on out and support.
Yeah.
Talk about testing for a minute, because you know, for a long time it was a stereotype there.
Oh, yeah.
People didn't want to come out and get tested. People didn't, you know, testing was just a foreign bad word.
Right.
What are you seeing? What do we know about testing now? Are things getting better?
Oh, very much so. We still feel like there needs to be more people tested, but the conversation of testing is so much more easier now. Now we have social media, and we go and it's like, oh, come in and get tested. And people come in, and we have the conversation. We bring them in. If they're tested negative, we have programs to stay in place to keep them negative, such as PEP, a pill you take within 72 hours if you even think you've been exposed, and you take it for 30 days and no HIV. And for people who are positive, every one of our sites, most of our sites, they are really, really close to hospitals that we work with, such as New York Presbyterian and Mount Sinai. All of them walking distance. So if you're even diagnosed, we immediately walk with you and continue the conversation to the hospital and hand you off to our medical providers and stay with you at the appointment.
World AIDS Day's coming up around the corner, and what have you got in store at the Alliance?
I guess the question is, what do we not have in store?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right.
We have poetry, readings. We're going to be having an amazing lunch. The Alliance has been blessed to have more than one site. Yes. So at all of our sites, we're going to be having activities in the morning way up to the afternoon. And it's free, and we welcome people to come and enjoy themselves.
Yeah. I love it. Also, because we are at several sites, there's movie days coming up. Also, a big holiday party around the 15th. We're going to have in Harlem, and it was beautiful last year. It's going to be beautiful this year as well.
Well, definitely want people to find out more information. Now, listen, if you need the website, you probably saw at the bottom of the screen, it is alliance.nyc, and you can go there and you can find out more information. Also, you can help them in their fundraising campaign, of course. They are trying to get there before January the 1st, and if you want to help them with that, definitely you can do that. I want to talk a little bit about some of your numbers about the Alliance for Positive Change. And you say about 3,500 low-income clients to life-saving medical care and treatment, and that's an amazing number.
Yes, it is, and you know, it literally takes a village. It takes a village. At the Alliance, everyone chips in, and everybody stands on the front line and assists. I just happen to have the pleasure of working in development, so I see the numbers, and even when I look at the numbers, I'm like, wow. We really are doing a lot of work. Like we really are helping people. Just last year alone, we served approximately 6,000 clients. And these 6,000 clients received services that they needed. So there's a lot of good things happening at the Alliance.
Well, good. Ebony and Brandon, well, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us a little bit about it. And hopefully, as we said, people get connected, and as World AIDS Day comes around, definitely finding a way. You see now some of the Midtown Central Office events taking place, and the office is 64 West 35th Street on the second floor, and there's activities all the way, all day. And the Lower East Side, you got the Harm Reduction Center, 25 Allen Street, and you got events 10:30 and 2 p.m., so come on out and be a part of the events. Then you've got CASA Washington Heights location. That's 2036 Amsterdam Avenue, and also Harlem. You go to Harlem, yes, the Keith Haring location, 315 East 104th Street. They are all around the city, so make sure that you have the opportunity to go out and check one of the various sites that you can come and be a part on World AIDS Day. Once again, thank you guys so much for coming and sharing with us. Good to have you. All right, taking a quick break. Be back with more Open right after this. Our next guest is the founder of Not On My Watch. It's a Safe Haven International Network, a network dedicated to bringing awareness to human trafficking and domestic violence. We're pleased to hear more about the organization. We welcome now the Reverend Que English here, and good to have you back.
Good to be back, Daren, my friend.
Good, as we're here talking, obviously a lot that goes on. We start off today talking about Matt Lauer and the termination of him with sexual misconduct. You've been talking a little bit about, you know, a lot of different things, domestic violence and human trafficking, and it seems like these numbers and these incidents are becoming more and more prevalent in our society.
Yeah, I think the prevalence is that there's a light being shown on it. You know, in the days past, it's more been, you know, what goes on in the dark stays in the dark, even with organizations knowing about some of the things that have been going on and turning a blind eye. But once it comes to light, you're either going to have to take action or be held accountable. And it's been sort of those things that where women over the years, and we can talk about that later, but over the years have been objectified. So when we think about what's happening in the area of human trafficking, it's not really a big surprise. This is not a new problem. This is something that has been going on continuously. That's why we look at the guy in Colorado getting 472 years for trafficking, right? And then you have another man in Pittsburgh running one of the worst rings in California, you know, getting about 267 years. So, you know, these numbers keep going up. And what we're realizing is that if we don't intentionally come together in doing something about this, and particularly in our own city, then we're going to see a widespread of this disease, you know, spreading across our nation, which is already at, what are we looking at, 1.5 million in the U.S. alone. New York City alone losing over 2,300 children. And when we think about the children, that's what's happening with the children, we're looking at average age 11 to 15 years old.
I want to back up on what you said, because when you talk about New York City, you said New York City has lost 2,300 children.
Right.
And those are believed to be connected to human trafficking. Now, by all standards, that would be considered an epidemic. That would be considered a crisis. But if we really tell the truth, we don't hear too much about this.
Right, we don't.
Why?
We don't. And I think because let me qualify this answer. As of today, we're doing more. We're doing more as a joint entity between service providers, city agencies, NYPD, in combating this problem head on. I'm also chairing Traffic Free NYC that convenes this meeting with city agencies, ACS and Department of Education and NYPD to look at ways we can better combat this. I do have to say that there have been some breakthroughs, particularly in the area of NYPD with the Trafficking Victim Protection Justice Act passing, where it now treats victims as victims versus then as criminals. And so with that in mind, we're finding more prosecution of Johns, more prosecution of pimps, even though that number is large. And let me qualify that number. That's just reported, and that was in 2013. We don't even have new data. What we do know is that it's rising. And a lot of people say, well, you know, Dr. Que, where is this happening in our city? It's happening everywhere. And the number one culprit for this is the web. What we're calling the dark net, because here they are selling our children. They have, and the sad part about it, some of these entities online, such as Backpage.com, have been protected from prosecution because there's a policy in our Communication Decency Act, Section 230, that protects them legally from being charged with facilitating this type of trafficking. And so what we're doing right now, we're fighting. We're fighting to see a bill passed in the Senate called SESTA, S-E-S-T-A. We're fighting to see a bill passed in Congress, whichever one comes up, H.R. 1865, so that we can go after these giants. And the sad part about it, you know who we have yelling First Amendment rights? It's the giants like Google. It's the giants like Facebook. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's about money. It's about money. And so what we're trying to get our electors to see is like, you can't play politics without children, because they're being lost right here in the Bronx. I've had people that were subjected to Backpage.com. I've had people in Harlem that his children have been on Backpage.com. I have a survivor from my own house of worship that was subjected to Backpage.com. And what do you think they do to these children? Mentally, emotionally, devastating. So we're in the fight of our life, and it is a fight that we're going to take to our grave so that we can see this next generation protected from these vile acts committed not only by the Johns, not only by the pimps, but also by the facilitators of these activities.
I want to say that you're also facilitating some training in regards to this.
I absolutely am, because education is power, awareness, power. Because through education, one of my students was able to identify that her friend's daughter was being trafficked because of education. We have our graduation coming up. Our next graduation comes up this Saturday at my house of worship, 1015 East Gun Hill Road, 11 o'clock in the morning. It is amazing. We had almost 50 come through this graduation. Last year in January, we had 150. We had another 50, then another 50. We are growing this as an army. Our next training is going to take place in February. February is 10th, and we're going to do this ongoingly, especially as we prepare for the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, which is in January. So we're really trying to get a jump on with this ongoing activity that's been taking place here in New York City. I do want to report that we have had some significant busts in New York City. NYPD has been doing some good things. We're finding a lot in massage parlors, right? And Staten Island had a big bust. Brooklyn, we see children being rescued there. As you know, there was a Brooklyn teacher that was creating this havoc. In Florida, we had over 200 arrested from those that are in the police force, the teachers, pediatricians, okay, that were all Johns, and they were able to arrest them. So it is an epidemic worldwide that we're all trying to put our arms around.
And the point that I was getting ready to get to when you started going through the list of those people who've been arrested is these are just, some people are just ordinary people that you work with on a day-to-day basis that you never know.
You never
know.
know.
Never suspect.
You would never suspect, because a lot of them hide behind their smartphone, behind the internet. It's safe for them. That's why we call it the dark net. They can protect their identity. They can create the meetups, which is what is happening ongoingly. I can have my daughter snatched. I can have her raped, and that perpetrator can put her online for sale. And that is where most of the activity, Daren, is taking place. Is through the web. Back in the day, we were on the street corners. We saw the fishnet stockings and the high heel shoes. That's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is the evil that is penetrating through our internet.
So I want to get a chance before we get out of here. Please tell people how they can take part in this training and awareness.
Absolutely. I want them to take part in the training. Give us a call, 646-564-6723. Go to our website, www.shnintl.org. In addition, we're doing a Purse for a Purpose campaign, because a lot of these survivors, whether human trafficking or domestic violence, they come out with nothing except the shirt on their back. So we're going to be blessing them in the whole month of January, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, with a purse with toiletry items. We would love for you to be a part of the campaign, whoever's listening, to donate purses and goods and monetary and monies in order for us to effectively serve the victims and survivors of trafficking and domestic
Reverend Que
violence.
English, thank you so much for coming and
Thank you
sharing
so
with us
much.
and bringing us the information about this
Absolutely.
human trafficking. As always, we want you to stay connected to us here on Open. We'll bring you more as we find out more information about this and bring you a heightened level of awareness as we continue to bring you the information surrounding a very prevalent problem in our society. Unfortunately, that about wraps it up for this episode of Open. We want to thank you for coming and sharing with us today, and want to let you know, listen, check us out every time on Bronx Says Channel 67.